We've had this country a history of a number of also of these sort of dialogues. One, it took place when the Freedom Charter came into existence. It was part and parcel of this process. And secondly, at the CODESA, we think because the intention is to be as inclusive as possible. But in terms of the agenda, we will have we have all the foundations represented. Unfortunately, the CEO of Mlambo Foundation have tendered an apology because the CEO is not feeling well. But we wish her well, and I've asked her that she needs to recover as soon as possible because there will be quite a number of follow-up meetings that will need to take the process forward. So we only have an apology from the Mlambo Foundation. So represented today, the number of foundations represented today is the Chief Albert Lutuli Foundation, Robert Sobukwe Foundation, Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, Ahmad Katrada Foundation, and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. So I would like, in terms of our agenda, Ms. Lindy Wegat from the Chief Albert Lutuli Foundation will be basically doing our welcome and opening for the program today. And Ms. Gat, please come to the floor. Thank you.
Good morning to everybody. I would particularly like to say a good morning and welcome to the members of the media who are present here today. It's very heartening that, can you hear me? It's very heartening that there is as much interest in this initiative as we are seeing as represented by the media. And that the message will get out to the people of South Africa today. I particularly would like to say thank you very much and welcome this morning to all of the foundations who are present here this morning. This is a very, very important initiative at a very, very critical time of our country's history. I'm particularly reminded that today is the day after the 26th of June. The 26th of June, for those who may have forgotten, was actually the foundation or the launch date of the Congress of the People. Bongani had already indicated that we have a history of dialogue in this country, and it is part of our culture, our political culture, our social culture, particularly when we find ourselves at times of transition. So I think that is the context in which we find ourselves here today. It is a call that has been made from numerous quarters over several years as we found ourselves along this journey. We find ourselves here today taking the first step, hopefully, towards making those calls a reality. In terms of the program today, we will have Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, who is known to, I'm sure, everybody here, who will be providing greater context to this call. We will have Mr. Nkosinathi Biko, who is representing the foundations, who will be reading the statement that was drafted by the foundations. And then we will have the individual foundations providing their own input and support to this initiative. And thereafter, members of the media will be able to engage in a Q&A session during that period. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Geraldine to kick us off for the morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Thanks, Lindy, for doing the welcome. And thank you for taking us back in time and reminding us what we are about as South Africans and what we do when we find ourselves in particular situations, especially as we look at charting a direction forward. We've never been a people that have sort of looked at ourselves in times of crisis and said, well, this is it. There's just despondency. Having said that, I think it's quite clear, building on what has been raised earlier, that South Africa is in a political crisis at this moment. For the first time in 30 years, the electorate have decided not to give any political party a majority vote. This has presented an opportunity for citizens, for communities, and for everyone to review the past years and to focus on what has gone wrong and how that can be addressed. The results produced by the 2024 elections calls upon all of us to reflect on the South Africa we want for the future and our children. And as was pointed out by Lindy, there's been 2 previous occasions, quite seminal for this country, where there has been a reflection of that sort. The one was at the Congress of the People, when the call was made for that resulted in the development, the formation of the Freedom Charter itself and the whole process around that. And the second one, CODESA, but I take it further and say the actual Constituent Assembly, because that constitution came through inputs, not of a few wise men and women, but it came as a result of contributions of the people of South Africa, and it resulted in the 1996 Constitution. What was set out when the democratic dispensation was established and the Constitution was adopted has not been achieved, and I think we all would agree there's a lot more work to be done. We started that with great enthusiasm, to an extent where some people talk about different ages or eras over the past 3 decades, a very short period, but significant in the lives of our people. So we started with great enthusiasm and we made gains, but we've also lost some of those gains in recent years. We've seen the increase in crime, gender-based violence, and youth unemployment at this point is at its highest level. Political apathy has not only been demonstrated by the proliferation of political parties that participated in this recent election, but the greatest warning was by the majority vote that was not to vote. The majority of people who withheld their vote, because that exceeded the numbers of the votes to political parties. So our country, as we all are aware, has more than 40 million voters, but only 16 million people voted. In the past 15 years, we've seen the collapse and paralysis of state-owned companies. This has resulted in stagnation of the economy and low economic growth. And in his review at Freedom Park, of the 30 years of democracy, President Thabo Mbeki pointed to a number of issues that have led to the collapse of governance and the undermining of the democratic state. And in his meeting with the foundations, he posed the question, what then must the nation do? And presenting the whole issue of a need to engage in a new inclusive national dialogue. He went as far as talking about the need to come together in a convention for a democratic renewal, or CODA. So, having made this call, he, well, he didn't make the call, we're making the call today. He called on existing civil society to engage and lead the process of the rejuvenation of the political, economic, and social fabric of our society. He, in his approach, he realized that the task was bigger than all of us. Even though he advocated for the country's foundations to lead the project, he was aware that such an ambitious project requires all sectors of society. And to this end, in discussions the foundations have held, there was a view that this is very clearly a whole of society and a whole of government initiative. So there's no exclusion of anyone. As a result, this bigger project might be initiated by some of the country's foundations, by making the call as we're doing today. But as I pointed out, the intention is to have an all-inclusive approach, including all sectors of society. And this will be spelled out when the call is made as to how extensive that is. The process is aimed at engaging communities at local, regional, provincial, and national levels. Our aim is not to be the leaders of this process, but to initiate and guide it. And in order for the process to be credible, there's a need to identify prominent and credible leaders in communities that have the track record to assist in steering the ship. It is understandable that this process is not going to take a few weeks or a few months. It might be a long and very involved process. As a result, there will be a need for establishing a structure that will manage it in a way that the voices of ordinary people are heard and recorded. President Mbeki also had some thoughts about that structure, but that requires an engagement, especially since we're talking about a whole of society and a whole of government process. The end result of this process should be to address political issues, and we can break that down, which includes upholding our constitution, economic issues, and if I put it simplistically, we don't want the scourge of hunger to continue as we see children dying of malnutrition in parts of our country. And I use that as one example. There's many others. And then there's social, and the issue of social cohesion that we need to deal with, and we need to get it right this time. So the emphasis by talking about the background is to say that today is about making the call. Thank you.
Geraldine, thank you for those words. I think they ground us both historically in the moment that we find ourselves with, but more importantly, they are forward-looking, and that is the challenge that we have for our future generations. And it's about the legacy that we have, a legacy these foundations have left with us. What we're challenged with here today is answering the question of what legacy do we want to leave as the people here today for those who are coming ahead of us. So thank you very much, Geraldine. At this point, I would then like to ask Mr. Nkosinathi Biko from the Biko Foundation to read the call that is co-drafted by the foundations. Thank you, Nkosinathi.
Good morning to the various representatives of the foundations gathered here, and good morning to the representatives of the media that responded to our invitation, and of course to the South Africans that sit behind your cameras and your pens. The statement that I will read has been prepared as a collective statement, and I can assure you that even the process of drafting this statement showed the kind of engagement that we want. It was a highly debated statement. and it's important that we are clear that as what we are doing is to create a very long family table to which we will invite all members of our family of South Africa. And in the nature of discussions at the family table, things can get heated. And when there are problems and challenges, perhaps they must get heated. The family table is not a place for comfortable conversations, because comfortable conversations, I believe, have led in part to the kind of false consciousness that I think describes who we have become. So this effort, therefore, is an effort to throw a stone in the pond, and hopefully the ripples will reach out to engage as many people as possible. So even as you see the parties that have drafted it, look not at where it begins, but where it ends, as outlined by Geraldine and as shall be outlined in the call. So the call reads as follows. We, the foundations that are signatories hereto, founded on the legacies of eminent South African freedom fighters, whose values and example laid the foundation for the building of a non-racial, non-sexist, egalitarian and democratic society, call upon the people of South Africa to join in a national dialogue to reorientate the direction of our nation. The purpose of the national dialogue is to develop a common vision, and through our collective agency, 1, intervene to bolster our substantive democracy, 2, recalibrate our developmental trajectory, and lastly, reorientate our nation towards the attainment of our deferred dream as we look forward to the next 30 years and beyond. For some time now, and certainly in the past 15 years, South Africa has found herself on a dangerous and uncertain path. A directionless corruption of our body politic that has led to the current state of paralysis in social, economic, political, and governance spheres, and national despair. The current parlor state of our economic growth, coupled with widespread corruption and crime, poverty, gross inequality, and intractable unemployment, have earned our nation a dishonorable place on many global indices. This poor performance is corroborated by the lived reality of the majority of our citizens, whose experience has rendered us the protest capital of the world. Such a ticking time bomb must be disarmed, and it must be disarmed through a more responsive democracy. The 2024 national and provincial elections have highlighted some of the ever-deepening features that exist in our society. They manifest, amongst others, in the yawning gap between the rich and the poor, the urban and rural. They manifest as inadequate governance, collapsing health and educational institutions, a relationship of mistrust between government and its citizens, high levels of corruption, crime and personal insecurity, and an abject failure of the social cohesion project that was intended to establish a fully non-racial and non-sexist society. There exists a palpable sense of despair, hopelessness, and general despondency. This feeling in society has been on the ascendancy for more than a decade and threatens to reverse the gains of our hard-fought democracy. As the foundations formed by or named after eminent South Africans whose values and actions are a guiding light for the building of a non-racial, non-sexist, equal and democratic South Africa, we are concerned about the perilous state that the country finds itself in. In spite of a proliferation of political parties and independent candidates in the recent 2024 elections, fewer voters participated than ever before. The results of these elections point to an increasing fragmentation in our society. This is an ominous sign that the faith of citizens in electoral democracy has declined since its birth in 1994. Of concern, of course, is the prospect that this voting trend may well be a symptom of declining faith in the very idea of democracy and a country united in our diversity. Against this background, it has become imperative that the entire nation focuses on extricating itself from this malaise. Fully cognizant that a democracy is an expression of the will of its citizens, and therefore is too important to leave to the often narrow interests of political parties alone. We, the foundations, as leading social institutions, believe that an urgent, inclusive, citizen-led national intervention is required to restore the legitimacy, credibility, and enhancement of the South African democratic project. It is time for every South African to take part in paving a new way forward. We call on all citizens to engage in defining a clear vision and to establish a unifying program that inspires new national hope. Out of this reflection must arise a renewed commitment to constitutional democracy and the urgency to improve the material conditions of those who are left behind. We note that during his inauguration, in the speech of the 19th of June 2024, President Ramaphosa made a call for a national dialogue on the future of our country. In doing so, he joins many South Africans who have expressed this very sentiment. We welcome and appreciate that the President has recognized that the time for such a critical engagement has come, as we believe that those tasked with governance must also occupy their place at the people's table of national dialogue. The process we seek will engage a whole range of South Africans who are organized in political bodies, civil society movements, children and youth organizations, and farm unions and representatives of the unemployed, scholars, women's organizations, sporting organizations, representatives of academic and educational institutions, think tanks, professional bodies, grassroots formations, traditional leadership, community-based organizations, rural formations, and other interest groups. It will reach as many sectors of our society as possible. We acknowledge with gratitude the many organizations that have already expressed their support for this endeavor, and indeed believe that such a widespread set of voices will resuscitate the soul of the nation. It must be stressed that the conveners of this call embark on it without predetermining its outcome. Otherwise, we would not be true to its objectives. Rather, it is our expectation that the collective imagination of citizens will organically produce a national compact that is a collective guide to fulfilling the aspirations of our people. Pursuant to this call, the foundations will approach government through the presidency, as well as other stakeholders in civil society and business, to ensure that such a national dialogue is adequately resourced and supported. Thus, to move the process forward, we envisage the following: that a secretariat shall be set up to develop the National Dialogue Program, and we are already committing to meeting as early as in the new week to embark on some of these. Elaborate engagements with different groups and communities across the nation will take place. Priority areas and work streams for dialogue topics and programs of engagement will be identified. Flowing from the dialogue, a national compact will be compiled, considered, and adopted. And the national compact will become the operational program for all sectors of our society, including government, parliament, civil society, and business. You have been provided with details below of institutions that are signatories here too, as well as for the purposes of communication. But let me read the list of those organizations that are behind this call as it stands. It's the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, the Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, the Jakes Gerwel Foundation, the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, the Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe Trust, the Steve Biko Foundation, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, and the Umlambo Foundation. This is where the statement stands. I thank you for listening.
Nkosinati, thank you very much for that. Before we come to questions and answers, as has been stated this morning, this is a collective call and a collective effort by the foundations. At this point, we would like to invite the foundations to make their supporting statements. First on the list, and I don't know if we do still have a representative, the Mlambo Foundation, if they could please come up. Then they're not here present. Could we then have a representative of the Robert Sobukwe Foundation, please? Thank you.
I don't know if this thing can move, but let's try. Is that okay? Yeah.
Some of us are generously proportioned. So. Good morning, colleagues from the foundations, and good morning, members of the media. I am happy to be standing here on behalf of the Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe Trust to also say with other colleagues that we did receive the call made by the patron of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, and we now, as part of the other foundations, making that call that we should come together as a nation and discuss some of the great challenges of the day. I am sure, as I'm standing up here, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, who would have been 100 years had he lived this year, would have been very proud of us, that we don't just sit back and complain and mourn, but take action to do everything that is possible to deal with this matter. There is something that makes me quite excited on behalf of our trust that we have taken this decision. Is because if we don't take it and don't intervene timeously, you can see out there that there are irresponsible leaders who are already telling people that the great questions of the day can still be answered through the barrel of the gun. And this is not something that we should encourage. I get very worried when I see young chaps wearing camouflage that are fake, pointing a finger as if they've carried a gun. And I'm sure, Geraldine, they've never even carried one gun during their lifetime. So I'm happy to see that. But I do want also to be bold and address some of the issues that I accept that are addressed here. We need to begin to address also the issue that is rising in the country, because it has really destroyed Africa and some African countries, the issue of ethnicity. It is becoming a challenge. We shouldn't run away from it. Geraldine was my boss in the public service. I don't know if it was there during her time, but now, for instance, even in our public service, if a minister or a director general comes from a particular region, the whole top management of that department will be coming from that region. And then you've seen now during the elections, people calling for independent KwaZulu-Natal, independent Western Cape, and so on. So I do think we should address that. Finally, as part of Africa and as Africans, some of us who have lived outside the country and we receive the hospitality of other Africans, we do get worried about the calls that seems to be close to xenophobia. The issue during the elections of some leaders who now might even be in cabinet, who are saying, Mabambe, let them go. without even talking about the qualification that some of them are here legally. So with those few words, I would like to stand up and say on behalf of the Sobukwe Trust, we will make this call, we will support it.
Thank you very much to the Sobukwe Foundation, and particularly thank you for reminding us that we are all Africans. We are part of a continent, and what we do is not just for ourselves, but for the cohesion of the continent as a whole. So thank you very much for those words. I would now like to call upon the representative of the Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation to come up and read their statement.
Good morning, everyone. I will just read the message of support. The Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation bases its existence on the life principle of its patron, Inkosi Albert John Mvumbi Luthuli. Chief Luthuli's political and leadership legacy can be encapsulated as one that bore humanitarianism, equality, and ethical morality at its core. Given the juncture that South Africa finds itself in, 30 years after the birth of our democratic dispensation, few will deny that much work remains for true equality, poverty eradication, liberation, and freedoms to be realized. CALF understands that the attainment of these noble ends can only be achieved through constant review, assessment, critique, and improvement of South Africa's state policies, architecture, political leadership, and society in general. The stagnation of democratic progress, coupled with clear mounting socio-economic regress, has resulted in the electoral outcomes of South Africa's 2024 national and provincial elections. South Africans have forced upon us a change of the political and leadership landscape of the country. Of his inauguration. CALF welcomes the merging of these two initiatives and look forward to deeper collaboration between this civic-led initiative and the government-led initiative. It is accordingly in this regard that we lend our support to the
Thank you, Sandile. May I call upon the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation to give their statement? And if you could please just introduce yourself to the media as you speak.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Natasha Ali, and I'm the acting CEO of the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. As the Tambo Foundation, our mandate is to preserve, promote, and protect the legacies and values of both Oliver and Adelaide Tambo. The values for which our honorees stood and the values for which our foundation stands are those of integrity, honesty, accountability, the rest of the nation and to each and every one of us. We know this is the beginning of a long, arduous journey, but this is why this call for a national dialogue is coming now at the beginning, to ensure that public involvement is sewn into the very fabric of this national dialogue. This is not an instructive process. It is not foundations telling the rest of the nation or government telling the rest of the nation what to do. This is collaborative, and we want collaboration sewn into the foundation of this national dialogue, having the people tell us how they want this nation to be governed, reiterating the people shall govern call from the Freedom Charter. This is an opportunity, as I've said, to reaffirm our commitment to our country and its development by re-emphasizing the call for the people to govern. It is also about having real, honest, and very difficult conversations, but very necessary conversations that need to take place in order for us to realize the future that we so desperately want. And while we are all together at the beginning of this journey, I'd like to just reaffirm the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo's thanks to all of you for the creation of this process, and affirm our support for this national dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the list, we have the representative of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. Thank you. And please introduce.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow foundation members and the media, my name is Mandla Gombe. I am the Deputy Chairperson of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. We have come here today Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. The reason we are here today is to lend support to the initiative that has been on the cards with a range of foundations here. We stand here on behalf of the foundation, which and cynicism towards summit must be that the summit democratized. And our sense is that that democratization of what's going
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. One advantage of being the last speaker, you can just, in my language, you just say in one word, "Klakaleo," and then you sit down. Or then you can sit down. So I don't intend to be long. I'm Vincent Mapai, and I represent the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. And I'm here to say we at Thabo Mbeki Foundation, first of all, I've on what needs to be done. Mirror and see what are you learning from the back that you require to take us forward. And this is we are at the worst of times, which makes this even a greater meaning what needs to be done. But one of the questions we need to ask is how can such an endowed country end up where it is. How did we end up here, and how do we make sure we do not end up where we are today? Because it is very ironic that we should be the envy of everyone, and we are ashamed even of ourselves. I think we need to ask that question. That is why this dialogue is very, very meaningful. We like the idea that this is inclusive. For South Africans. And lastly, so in this matter, you are going to be both players and referees. We hope. And your greatest strength is that your operatives, and I use that word deliberately, on the ground, they are closer to communities. Let us bring all of that at the table and make South Africa great again. Thank you.
Through the various legacies, some ethnicity issues that we must manage as this country. And we have the vocabulary to manage that. Biko not only taught us black consciousness, he challenged white South Africa to deal with his own consciousness. And collectively for us to be at a better place in respect of this issue of consciousness. And so we will bring that legacy to the table in the understanding that those who occupy their place at the table are wanting to make this country work. If they have an agenda other than that, we commit from the Mbeki Foundation that their seat at the table would be extremely uncomfortable. And now I'd like to then open it up, and we will deal with the issue of questions. I'll go anti-clockwise. 1, 2, 3, and 4. This way is 5. Okay. And your questions. Any comments from the table? From the other foundations?
Sorry,
Geraldine?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sorry, Dr. Did you please go to the podium for sound?
Sorry. Okay. Thank you. I believe Nkosinati responded to the first question that had come up from Zianda, which covers the engagement and relationship with the GNU going forward. I mean, there's no question about that. However, on what our views are on the GNU and all that, and all the questions that came from Sunday World and so on, we haven't really sat as foundations to debate this issue and to reach a decision on it. And you would recall when Nkosinati started reading out the call, he said that even the call that has been adopted here was as a result of a lot of debate. It wasn't somebody put something on the table, we all agreed with it, and we're living happily ever after. And similarly, we may have different views, nuance around particular issues related to the GNU or the partners involved, or around is this a coalition or not, is the ANC selling out or not. As far as I'm concerned, as chair of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, we believe that the GNU is a decision that has been arrived at by the National Executive Committee of the ANC through a particular process. There are very terms terms that's to govern it, and we are awaiting that outcome. But to expect a common position from us as foundations at this point would be premature. I think a lot of this will come out of the process going forward. There's a lot we need to engage on. Has citizens lost hope? And I'm sorry I'm jumping the gun, Nkosinati and Natasha, but I just want to read a message that I received whilst this process is taking place. This comes from someone, and the person said, "The task ahead is not misunderstood, but this is so invigorating. Despair sorted, am a happy citizen." So I thought that just captures what's coming from out, and there's a number of other messages, and I'm sure you guys received it as well as others around the table, but I think that captures it. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine. So I think Zianda, that in part deals with the question that you asked. Of the foundations to involve youth formations as best we can. I do believe that the success of this and the conversations to flow from it are dependent on the participation of young people. What will happen in our discussions, we had indicated that we would meet for the first meeting to deal with the structure issues, including the secretariat and so forth, which will give us the detail to reach out to those institutions. But we know the corners where youth are organized. We know both youth formations that are in place. We know where to find them through religious institutions, for instance, such as the South African Council of Churches and others. And all of those avenues will be what then the team is working, the commitment being to ensure that this is as representative of young people as can be possible. Khomein, I want to make sure that you are covered. You had asked about the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to which we responded. I'm sorry, is there part of your question that has been lost? Okay, that has been also attended to. I think we have covered those. Is there a question that we have left in the first round?
Just to help somebody that was raising something about Orania. No, in the CODESA committee that dealt with that matter, Tozamila Bwata was there. That person can have time.
Since I was not going to be responding, I didn't listen to the question.
Taken offline. You owe us that.
I think, Zianda, you'd asked how far in the process are we, and how we're going to interact with government, right?
Yeah, but also, I mean, maybe I should be more pointed. So this thing of having a long table,
Yeah.
the problem is South Africans might be tired of a talk shop. So having a long table could mean a very prolonged process, and yet there are other things that are happening. For instance, Parliament, there's different kinds of views. So the situation could be deteriorating while you're just extending the table. So fast tracking it, youth participation, how soon? That's what people want to know.
So let me clarify the long table. The long table issue is in respect of participation. That's the primary emphasis, in respect of participation. We are, however, also putting in place a conversation that will help issues of the next 30 years, right? Now, if you are familiar with the governance process, here is normally what happens, at least as I understand it. As we speak, a government that comes into place is dealing with annual performance plans that are already in place, right? The government also has got what they call a 5-year strategic plan that deals with the more 3 to 5 year scenarios, right? This process is to feed into those conversations, the medium to long-term outlook of the country. We are aware, of course, that there is an unsettled GNU, which in outcome will also inform how those conversations play out around this table. Okay.
I think also just to say, and to be completely transparent, we are definitely at the beginning of this process. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. And the reason it isn't shameful is because we want to start this off on the right foot. So to say that we're, you know, far along in the process and we know how this is going to pan out and we know what we don't. And I think that's really okay that we don't know. There is space at this metaphorical table for cynicism, for skepticism, but then do something. Be cynical, be skeptical, but then still come to the party, come to the table and voice those things, and then help, as you are an active citizen, help us along in this process. It's your duty to this nation. I think that's it.
Is there a next round of questions?
No, I think Auntie Charles wanted to wrap.
Oh, you want to wrap? Oh. Okay, we'll take just 2 more hands and then we'll close it. Okay, we'll take the 2 hands that we hadn't taken. 2 hands we have not taken. Yeah?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Chokwe. I'm a camera operator and a documentary filmmaker. So I just like the whole foundations coming together. So what we've done, we formed a Soweto cycling club in Soweto. So we've got a group of about 50 kids. We just get them to cycle around Soweto. But we're extending our program now into storytelling, because it's a group of us, we're creatives, most of us are photographers or whatever, but now we're getting the young people to tell stories through visual medium. That's what we do. Because we've identified that there are a lot of things that are happening in the township. Young people are getting into drugs, but the issue is identity issues. Some people get into all of those things because they don't really know who they are. So we kind of tell them about the works of Utatu Sobukwe, Utatu Biko, and the books that we've read. But basically, as creatives, we're also kind of doing something in the townships. So we're spreading our program now to Eastern Cape and other areas. So I just wanted to pitch that. So yeah, we just focusing mainly on identity issues. And there's a big identity crisis happening, which causes young people to get into drugs and all of that. So yeah, I just wanted to add that it's not a question.
Thank you, Davi. But it does do what we were advised by Dr. Mapai, to say that there is an expectation for people, even those around this room. It's part of the telling of the story. And I think that for institutions that are already organized, our advice would be to direct your expressions of interest towards our secretariat so that we can pull those energies into this. Right. There was really one more hand there, but I see now they are growing.
Okay.
Morning, Alpha Ramuswana here from Eyewitness News. Mine is just a point of clarity.
Yeah.
I think most speakers who spoke mentioned that they don't want to predetermine the outcome of the dialogue. It's just better to be clear to South Africans what exactly you want to achieve by convening this dialogue. That's number one. Number two, you mentioned that it wants to also repair the broken democracy. What do you attribute this to? What do you think that we are here for? Why do you think we're here? Why do you describe this democracy as one that needs to be repaired?
Okay. And maybe your hand, the last one?
My name is Amanda Khoza. I'm a presidency correspondent for News 24.
Yes.
In one of his State of the Nation addresses, the president mentioned or announced that he'd like to form a social compact within 100 days. We know that obviously those 100 days lapsed and he was subsequently criticized by former President Thabo Mbeki. I just want to know if this dialogue is contributing to the formation of a social compact, or is it something completely different? Because it's sounding like the vision that was proposed initially, and then obviously the gears are moving with this process.
Let me start with that last question, and maybe just to bring better clarity to what it is that we are doing. The call that we are making is a call, if we were to describe it, that is a bottom-up call. There's been dialogue happening in our country. There's been dialogue happening within government, political formations. What we are trying to do is to do a bottom-up call so that there is no discussion about the future of our country that is not informed by the people of our country, right? At elections, what citizens do is that they give politicians the opportunity to organize themselves to lead them. And we have just done that. What we hope we can do with this process is to give a list and areas of priority that define better how it is that we wish to be governed. Questions were asked about the GNU that are yet to be discussed. But it is concerning from the perspective of the Steve Biko Foundation that the discussion that is happening now is about position. Even from institutions that were saying we don't want cadre deployment, they are busy deploying cadres as we speak, right? And the agenda of what it is that must be done for this country has not quite landed from those that have just been given a mandate, right? And so that would be something that we wish to contribute to. Why are we here? And I'll open this question also to the table in terms of some of the challenges that we've outlined, but we have outlined generally the areas that are of concern to this country. The purpose of the table is to then have a detailed reflection on those. And we are quite clear about the things that we want as an outcome. If you go back to the statement that we've just read, right? In the second paragraph, we outline 3 areas that we said we want. The first one is to develop a common vision, we say in the statement. And then through our collective agency, and this is where this process perhaps departs from others, in that it places the responsibility to do that in the hands of our citizens. Right? Steve Biko had a way of describing this. We cannot continue to be spectators in a game in which we should be players. And that is what we are trying to accentuate, right? To intervene and bolster our substantive democracy, right? And the challenge is that although our electoral democracy is firmly in place, we are in the habit of disengaging as citizens in the 4 years between that. We must improve the quality of our substantive democracy, right? And the power of those that govern us originate from people. It is time for people to say, unto the people power shall return, right? And so in so doing, we then hopefully can recalibrate our trajectory so that 30 years from now, we are not asking anew, why are we here? Because then the real question we should be asking is, what have we done about it all along, right? And those are the things we seek to do through this dialogue. Thank you.
Now, I think it's important that we draw a distinction between lack of interest in voting and contrast that with what's happening in almost every street across the length and breadth of South Africa. In every street, people are engaged. We've learned from COVID, and we've learned now. People have come together to fix up their potholes, and they've crossed ideological lines to do that. They've crossed political lines to do that. Major towns and cities across the country have found common ground to fix up when municipalities fail. So there is no, I think the notion that people are not interested and not participating is one that we must put aside. What we are seeing is a withdrawal from party political processes. And there's a huge distinction. Yeah. What this process needs to be about, this dialogue, is how do you harness that energy that exists out there from street committees to Stockfells and everybody else that are involved in just getting organized to get through day-to-day life into a structured dialogue process that focuses on the core issues. Now, if you can imagine, if something like this had existed in Gauteng or Johannesburg today, a structured dialogue process would have meant that the water institutions would have engaged with the citizens of this province to have said, here's the problem, this is what we think we must do, but would have come up with the solutions with people involved. What you now have is the exact opposite. We know that repairs need to be done across the city, but nobody understands why. Nobody understands the how. And it is that process of bringing together people in an organized formations with those who are going to be in positions of power to find the solutions that work and to then make sure that we take ownership over it. The long-term benefits of this, the street poles that you see collapsing across the length and breadth of South Africa, that's because people think that it doesn't belong to us, it's governments. And that's the mindset that we have to begin to change through this kind of work. So the possibilities that a government of national unity opens up for greater participation is something that we now need to harness, we need to deepen, and we need to make maximum use of going forward. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for democratic renewal in ways that we might not have imagined up until now.
I think that we should end it there. There was one question related to markets that we didn't touch on. we'll take it, as they say, offline. Colleagues, let's take the opportunity to thank you. The invitation did come out, I think, yesterday. You've come out in your numbers. We are seeing the youth that we want to see, even from the media space. And we want to continue to invite you to journey with us here, as I said, and as Prof said, not only as people who report on this. Let us see how we are going to take the outcome of this to your respective newspapers, to your radio stations, and to your television stations as conversation pieces as we take this message deeper into our society. Thank you very much for turning out in good numbers.
I'm sorry, just before we close, if I may.
Thank you. You went very well.
I would, sorry, before we close, the table continues to grow. I would like to acknowledge and welcome the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, who have joined us here today, and we look forward to your participation. If I may just say one final word. The first words of our Constitution, which encapsulates what binds us, are the words, "We the people of South Africa." And it doesn't talk about people to speak on behalf of us. It's about we the people of South Africa. That is this process. It is about we the people of South Africa. Over the last 30 years, perhaps what we did was we forgot that democracy is more than just voting at a national election, voting at a local election, and very few of us voting at a by-election. It's about we the people, and let this process be by we the people. Thank you very much.
Well done. I can't go back.